Y'all, this is a really difficult video. I almost didn't make it because the nature of the content is so sensitive. So first and foremost, my heart goes out to all the affected families in the Fort Myers Beach and Southwest Florida areas that were affected by Hurricane Ian. If you all want to donate to the relief efforts, I put some links in the description down below to some aid organizations that are doing really great work. So please, please, please donate what you can. But the reason that I'm making this video is because I've had so many people reach out to me, emailing me, DMing me, asking if this storm is going to have an effect on the Florida real estate market. So I wanted to address that, and I also thought it would be helpful to take a look at past storms to see their effect on real estate, to judge whether the current circumstances could result in similar outcomes or if we're dealing with a totally different situation. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video, and hopefully it educates y'all on the matter and inspires you to donate to any of those aid organizations in the description down below. Hurricane Ian was a Category 4 hurricane that recently struck western Cuba, Florida, and South Carolina at the end of September 2022. The death toll in the U.S. as of filming this is now over 110 people, 105 of which were in Florida. The total economic impact of the storm is believed to be well over $60 billion worth of damage at this time. There were also widespread power outages, massive property damage, and many people's entire homes and lives were swept away. Unfortunately, many of those people didn't have flood insurance, which is going to make rebuilding impossible for a lot of them and extremely costly for those who are able to rebuild. Although Florida actually has more homeowners with flood insurance than any other state, only 18% of homeowners have coverage. Although that's expected to be a higher number near the coast, many people have dropped flood insurance coverage since October of 2021 when FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, revamped their federal flood insurance rate system, which made premiums skyrocket. So in addition to high insurance premiums, we're also in a higher interest rate environment than when many of these homeowners purchased their homes, meaning to buy a similar home now, they'd have to spend considerably more on their monthly payments and for the life of the loan, assuming they're even financially able to make a purchase at this time. Of course, people who have federally backed mortgages are required to purchase flood insurance if they're in the 100-year floodplain, but outside of that area, it's optional. So anyone whose home was purchased cash, purchased with a non-federally backed mortgage, their federally backed mortgage has been paid off, or they're outside of that 100-year floodplain are all potential candidates for having flood damage, but no flood insurance. According to FEMA, a quarter of all claims come from outside of that 100-year floodplain. So this is an especially troublesome trend considering that climate change is causing hurricanes and other weather events to be more and more extreme on average. If you don't believe me about that, go study the findings from insurance companies themselves who have big money on the line and huge research departments to study these kinds of things, all right? So naturally, after big storms, the amount of insurance claims go up astronomically, which also increases the cost of insurance premiums to consumers. And Florida has been absolutely riddled with fraudulent insurance claims throughout the years, which skyrockets premiums unnecessarily across the state and has even caused many companies to stop insuring Florida homes altogether, which, you guessed it, also raises insurance premiums. 6 homeowners property insurers actually became insolvent this year alone because of the cost of doing business in Florida. So because there's now a lack of private insurers in the state, many people are forced to go with Citizens or Citizens Property Insurance Corp., the insurer of last resort that was created by the state and explicitly does not cover flood damage. So you have high insurance premiums, homeowners with no insurance who may have suffered partial or complete losses, and like I mentioned, we're in a high interest rate environment. But wait, there's more. Because of the massive scale of destruction, the demand for contractors and building supplies always goes way up after storms, and of course, this naturally raises prices for contractor work and the building materials they use. Not to mention the pandemic already had driven up the cost of materials. So these circumstances may lead to many homeowners finding out that their insurance payout for replacing their home is actually much less than the cost of doing so. Plus, uninsured homeowners may not be able to make repairs regardless of the cost, depending on their financial position. So, naturally, with destroyed and damaged homes, supply will be decreased in the affected areas, which could drive up prices. But are people wanting to move into those areas at the same rate now? Well, in an article from Politico, according to Dave Burt, CEO of the investment research firm Delta Terra Capital, year-over-year home sales have declined 19% through May in the United States 100-year floodplain and 22% in wildfire-prone areas compared with a 15% average decline across the country. So there are less sales in these disaster-prone areas. Burt said that much of that is owed to steeper insurance rates and improved perceptions of the risks that climate change poses to housing. So, taken together, rising insurance costs and higher interest rates from the Federal Reserve's inflation-fighting push means fewer investors could be willing to buy and flip flooded properties here in Florida, removing a major off-ramp for homeowners from past disasters. So, that could deepen the spiral, according to Burt. There's probably going to be lots of strategic defaults, Burt said. They're going to migrate, they're going to leave. So when Burt's firm ran an analysis last year of metropolitan areas at greatest risk to a disaster-fueled repricing that depressed home values, the Cape Coral and Fort Myers, Florida metro area in Lee County topped the list. As insurance costs rise, home values are likelier to fall, which could send ripples throughout the market, he said. Quote, in the past, what we've seen is economies and importantly, real estate markets have been able to absorb these type of events, Burt said. That's because past disasters have not changed people's long-term expectations for ownership costs, he added. I think that might change this time around, end quote. While that's a very interesting perspective and time will definitely tell what's going to happen, let's go ahead and take a look at historical prices after hurricanes to see if they tend to have any measurable effect on home values. So we're looking at a report from the National Association of Realtors, or NAR, called The Impact of Hurricanes on Housing and Economic Activity, a case study for Florida. And we find that historically speaking, local economies of affected regions, at least in Florida, generally rebound quicker after storms. Job markets tend to strengthen following hurricanes due to reconstruction efforts in the region. Both federal assistance and private insurance payouts surely contribute to the quick rebound. Also, housing activity declined significantly in the months immediately following the hurricanes. But as with the job market, housing activity returned to pre-storm conditions generally within 3 to 4 months of the hurricanes. Florida has been the top state in terms of net migration for quite some time now, and the number of people moving into the Sunshine State far exceed the number of people moving out. Only 1/3 of current Florida residents were actually born in the state, surprisingly, and recent migration patterns of people moving into and out of the hurricane-affected regions and all of Florida suggest no lasting, longer-term migration impact. And the impacted regions continue to draw a high number of new residents, essentially the same as before the hurricanes. So now let's take a look at the impact on housing of only Category 3 and higher hurricanes to have touched down in Florida since Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Before that, the data is too limited to draw any meaningful conclusions from in this regard, so let's go ahead and jump on into it from Andrew and beyond. Hurricane Andrew hit the Miami area in late August 1992, specifically Homestead area. The storm did over $27 billion in damages. According to NAR, the National Association of Realtors, home sales fell in Florida by 4.1% in the third quarter of 1992 when the hurricane hit from the second quarter, even after accounting for seasonal changes. And on a year-over-year basis, sales in Florida fell 4.8% in the third quarter, while national home sales rose 5.2%. The decline in home sales lowered home prices in the Miami-Fort Lauderdale region by 0.9% year over year in the third quarter. In the quarter prior, the local prices had risen 3.2% year over year. However, annual price appreciation was 7.3% in the fourth quarter for the Miami-Fort Lauderdale region, while nationally, home prices rose at a much slower, though more stable 3.2% in the fourth quarter of 1992. Next up, Hurricane Opal made landfall between Fort Walton Beach and Panama City in early October 1995. The damage estimate was $3 billion from this Category 3 hurricane, and according to the Florida Association of Realtors data, home sales fell significantly in October in the Panhandle region. In September, the month prior to the hurricane, home sales in Pensacola were up 24% from a year before, up 10% in Fort Walton Beach, and neutral in Panama City. In October, sales were just 1% higher in Pensacola, down 29% in Fort Walton Beach, and down 31% in Panama City. For the state as a whole, home sales rose 8% in October, essentially the same rise as in September. Clearly, as in Hurricane Andrew, home sales were impacted heavily in the immediate month of the hurricane hit. The substantial changes in home sales resulted in substantial changes in home prices. The Panhandle region had enjoyed a strong double-digit growth in home prices prior to the hurricane. The price growth then slowed significantly after the hurricane, going from 12% year over year in September for Pensacola to 5% year over year in October, and going from 19% year over year in September for Panama City to 9% year over year in October. And note that all of these are still positive growth numbers, okay? Now, in 2004, there were 4 hurricanes in a 42-day span from August 13th to September 25th. Those were Hurricanes Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Jean, raking in a total of $45 billion in destruction. The Port St. Lucie region was hit with 2 of these storms, Hurricanes Jean and Francis, for $16 billion in damages, while Pensacola region got Ivan at $14 billion in damages, and Punta Gorda got Charlie at $15 billion in damages. Again, home sales dipped considerably in each of these metro areas immediately following the storms. The Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie area saw a 48% decrease year over year in home sales the month of the 2 storms in September, and a 21% decrease year over year in October, the month after. Pensacola saw a 64% decrease year over year the month of the storm, but rebounded to a 22% increase year over year the month after in October. As with other markets, home prices did not bear any negative impact following the hurricane. Pensacola, if anything, showed an accelerating price trend after the hurricane. As to the longer-term impact, the Florida housing market became red hot through the first half of 2005, after that 2004 hurricane season and before the start of the 2005 hurricane season. The median home price had risen by a dramatic 28% compared to the same time a year before. In 2005, Florida saw another fierce hurricane season with hurricanes Dennis, Rita, and Wilma. The infamous Katrina also hit South Florida, albeit as a Category 1, before heading to the Gulf and ultimately New Orleans. Pensacola got Dennis in July. Home sales slid that month, then returned to normal shortly after, and home price appreciation was exceptionally strong both before and after Dennis. South Florida was hit with Cat 1 Katrina in August, with comparably negligible damage in South Florida. Cat 5 Rita in September with $4 to $7 billion in damages, and Cat 5 Wilma in October for $12 billion in damages. Home sales took a turn for the worse as a result. However, unlike previous hurricane impacts, sales remained depressed for over 6 months after the storms ended. But this could have also been a compounded effect of drastic price increases throughout the preceding year, a 17% increase in 2004 and a 29% increase in 2005, as well as historically high interest rates at the time. After 2005, things were quiet until Hurricane Irma showed up to the Florida Keys and then swung around and hit Southwest Florida in September of 2017 as a Category 4. Irma did a total of $52 billion worth of damages in the U.S. and $77.2 billion of total damage throughout the U.S. and Caribbean, and resulted in 134 deaths. The NAR study on hurricane impacts on housing prices was before this time period, But from my research, it appears to have slowed sales in Monroe County, the predominantly affected area, by about half of the normal amount for 2 months and then returned to normal. It's hard to tell the effect on sale price because there are so few sales in Monroe County in any given month that the median figures can swing wildly because of just a couple or a few big or small sales. So hard to draw a conclusion there. Overall, though, median sale price in Monroe County has only increased since 2017. And lastly, before Ian, our most recent larger hurricane was Michael, which hit Florida in the Panhandle in October of 2018, which was the first Cat 5 to make U.S. landfall since Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Michael was responsible for at least 74 deaths, including 59 in the U.S. and 15 in Central America. It caused an estimated $25 billion in damages and affected the Florida Panhandle cities of Mexico City Beach and Panama City the most. Like normal, sales slowed for the month of the storm by negative 12% year over year in Panama City Beach and 100% in Mexico City Beach, meaning there were no sales. But then the following month, sales were up by 17.9% year over year in Panama City. However, Mexico City Beach sales didn't recover for 3 months. Interestingly, Mexico City Beach didn't see positive price growth year over year until November of 2019, a year and a month after the storm, which probably is because it's a smaller town, which has a lot of built-in challenges that are tougher to overcome for smaller cities with smaller budgets. Panama City, on the other hand, never saw a decrease in median sale price after the storm, even seeing an 8.7% increase the month of the storm. So in conclusion, it seems very unlikely that Hurricane Ian will have much of an impact on housing prices across Florida. It's very likely that the areas directly affected will see a drastic slowdown in the number of sales during October and likely in November as well, but things should start to bounce back to normal soon after that. Also, it's unlikely that we'll see a decrease in median sales prices in the affected areas over the next month to 6 months, as historically the effect is nominal and because there's just so much demand for Florida real estate and prices just continue rising over the long term. Now, there are always investors who are able to sort of capitalize on situations like this, and it often can benefit those who are affected. Obviously it's not ideal, but they're in a rock and a hard place, and especially those who are uninsured or underinsured are able to potentially at least, it potentially can help them pick up the pieces of their lives and have a nest egg to sort of move on to the next chapter or the next steps, right? So for example, if someone was uninsured for a home that cost $500,000 on the open market before the storm, and the cost to repair their house is going to be $100,000, but they don't have that money, an investor can come in, offer them $350,000 cash, do the repairs themselves, and then net the other $50,000 in after repair value equity for their time and risk of doing the repairs. Meanwhile, the previous homeowner, although likely not having the best days of their lives, obviously, at least now they have $350,000 or the difference between that and the balance of their mortgage to be able to go on and do what they're going to do next as far as housing. So those are my thoughts based on the data I was able to uncover, as well as my experience having been a Florida resident for going on 17 years now. Only time will really tell, but it's likely to just be a temporary slowdown, for sure a long recovery, and ultimately Florida real estate will probably just keep being Florida real estate and remain as high demand as ever. But I'd love to know what you all think or what you're seeing in your area after the storm, especially if you're in Southwest Florida. So let me know in the comments down below. And if there's anything I can do to assist you in the world of real estate, all my contact info is below as well. And make sure that you hit up those links down there to donate whatever you can. Stay safe, take care of yourself and your neighbors. Jake Fletcher with the Fletcher Group at eXp Realty here, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.